Here we are, BC Poly Hot Stove for today, Thursday, November 7th, 2019. Maclean, it is the first day of my new year. The ICBA AGM Gala is in the rearview mirror, and now I am fully focused on the year 2020. How are you doing?
And I'm doing very well, and I know that you are just as excited to chat with me as you were to interview Troy Aikman the night before last.
Obviously. Now, first of all, I want to thank the Orca and you, Maclean, for sponsoring, being one of our sponsors at the ICBA AGM Gala. I know you had a table there with Jody and Ada and George Affleck, all Rick Clough, the bright firmament of stars that make up the Orca, all there with you, including a certain redheaded quarterback from the BC Lions.
That's right.
With a Grey Cup ring, which was pretty cool. But yeah, it was a great night. We had more than 800 people in that room. Celebrating construction, celebrating free enterprise, the work ICBA does, and topped off with a fun conversation about Troy Aikman, where I grilled him on the important issues of the day, like could he take Joe Buck in a dance-off?
He said that he'd never been asked that question before, and that should there be a lull in tonight's Thursday night game, and Thursday night games there are often lulls, that he might just say, on the weekend I happened to be in Vancouver.
Yes.
And got asked. So, Joe, what do you think? So I think, the audience in Vancouver and BC in general for Thursday Night Football tonight might be a little higher.
Exactly. The funny thing is that, it's a little intimidating to be in a room, first of all, interviewing, Troy Aikman, who you've grown up watching on TV and, playing quarterback, 3 Super Bowl championships. And then, I look around the room and, there's, Jody Vance, the first female national sports anchor in Canadian history. You look over, there's Bob Marjanovic, great football play-by-play guy for TSN 1040. You got Jazz Johal working the room, you got all these, Rick Clough is there, for God's sake. You got all these professional interviewers, and then I go up on stage and, talk football with Troy. So it's that I find more intimidating than actually meeting the football player. It's like knowing who's in the crowd. Carol Taylor is there. It's a big thing.
But you did well, and
you have to say that. You have to say that
never
because
been asked that question before.
You don't want me to storm off the podcast, so you have to say that. But I appreciate that nonetheless. But let's talk BC politics.
Oh, other way. He did well. I'm pointing the wrong way. He did well.
I did well. Thank you. BC politics. Let's talk about it.
Yes.
Maclean, your big splash is literally a splash because I think the answer to the question you're about to pose is that it's in Tofino surfing. But go ahead.
Well, yeah, I don't know if our listeners and viewers will remember, but we had a federal election. And usually after an election where the incumbent government wins, and I realize it's a minority government now, it's a faster turnaround in terms of announcements about key staff positions in the Prime Minister's office and cabinet. Usually when there's an incoming government coming in, there's a little more time taken for obvious reasons. But no, it's been very quiet out of Ottawa. And yes, the Prime Minister took a vacation and went surfing in Tofino. But I guess he's not going to make any decisions about such crucial things as who his chief of staff is going to be. Who's going to be in cabinet? 2 cabinet ministers were defeated in the election, after all, in Ralph Goodale and Amarjeet Sohi, and I think that's all. And also, will Parliament sit again this year? And we're not going to know any of these questions till after next week when he meets with all the opposition leaders, which I don't think includes Elizabeth May.
Oh, well, it is a funny thing, and especially when you compare it to last time. Well, now, first of all, I will say there has been some cabinet discussion, but mainly confined to who should represent Alberta, Saskatchewan. Because they have no MPs in those 2 provinces, and obviously you need to have some regional representation. That aside, you're quite correct. It's completely different than the last time where Trudeau was everywhere. I remember he goes into the Canadian diplomatic embassy or whatever, and people are applauding, and the bureaucrats are rushing to get selfies with him, and in a disgusting show of partisanship. But whatever, it is very different. It's also very different. I'll be curious how they swear in the cabinet. Or the last cabinet swearing in, it was a real love fest. If you think of the images of it, right? He's hugging every single one of them. Him and Bill Morneau like this in the photo that launched 1,000 pieces of slash fiction. It is really different this time, and I'd like to chalk it up to maybe the kid's learning some humility. He's older than me, but that he's learning some humility. But at the same time, I don't think it is. I think it's just maybe he's burnt out, and
Well, it's different. I mean, it was easy to be triumphal when they had defeated a longtime conservative government and won a pretty thumping majority. But this time, all the conversation has been about Andrew Scheer, and we're going to talk about him later, and Elizabeth May to a lesser extent. But I mean, what's kind of been lost in this election was that the Liberals they were reduced in seats.
Yeah.
This is a minority government now, and so I mean, it's not quite a slap on the wrist, but it wasn't a ringing endorsement either. And so I think they've been smart in some respects to kind of downplay the post-election victory march. And so yeah, you're right. It'll be how they choose to swear in cabinet and all that kind of thing. It'll be very interesting to see how they manage that.
Yeah, and let's face it, there were only three parties who lost seats: the PPC, the NDP, and the Liberals. Everyone else gained, maybe not as much as they had hoped, but every other party gained seats. Well, I guess there's only two other parties. Well, the Bloc, so three parties. So three were
Bloc
up.
gained big.
Three were up, three were down. It will be interesting to see. There was a lot of focus on, we'll come to Scheer in a second, but there's a lot of focus on, will the Conservatives exercise their right to vote on the leader? The Liberals have the same right. The Liberals could, sit back and go, well, we just lost 20 seats, maybe it's time. They won't get the same kind of scrutiny from the media, the same kind of like prodding questions. But if you're Krista Freeland, you're sitting there and you're thinking to yourself, I heard at every door I knock that, your guys got to do better. It's got to be floating in the back of the head.
Yeah, and I hope it's being brought up in a dignified way. That the people like Krista Freeland and some of Trudeau's advisors are saying, Prime Minister, congratulations, we're still in government, but you got to know that you probably have to change gears a little, because I don't know that Justin Trudeau, and I'm trying to be nice. I don't know that Justin Trudeau was an asset in that election campaign, and I'm setting aside the stuff like the blackface, which is difficult to do. But I mean, people were happy to see him 4 years ago, and I don't know that that's true anymore.
Yeah, it reminds me of Christy Clark, right? We went from an election where, on sheer force of her will, she brought the Liberals back from a certain defeat in 2013, and by 2017 she was toxic on the doorsteps. And you heard from so many candidates, and even though she formed a minority, she won the most seats, and she could have hung on if Daryl Plekas didn't put the knife in her. She didn't. She took she left, and the rest is history. So I do sometimes wonder, is that possible in the Trudeau Liberals? Although it's such a cult of personality, that group. But then Krista Freeland took him off. There was no Team Trudeau nonsense in her riding.
No, and a few other candidates as well, I think. But I mean, the difference is that the comparison with Christy Clark is interesting because Christy Clark had no choice but to resign the way things shook out.
Yeah.
The way that this election worked out, with a very diminished and frankly broke NDP, and the Conservatives, and again we're going to get there, wondering what's next for them. The Liberals can almost govern like they have a majority, because none of the other parties have any interest or ability in forcing them to call another one. And so yes, they did receive kind of an electoral something less than a slap on the wrist, but there's no danger of the government falling.
Yeah, and there's no unifying thing between the NDP and the Conservatives that they'd both be like, we got to take them down. Pipelines, Conservatives will prop it up. Energy files, the Conservatives will prop up. And then, social files, the NDP will prop up. So it's a good spot. If you're going to have a minority, it's probably a good spot to be in. My big splash, though, is the TransLink strike. And Maclean, I know this doesn't affect you over there, being cut off from civilization as you are. But, a big deal here in the Lower Mainland, and becoming a bigger deal every day. The impending, there's already some job action, Seabus sailings being canceled, mechanics not working overtime on buses. This is going to continue to snowball, and the NDP government have come out and said they're not getting involved. This is TransLink's issue. TransLink has said, we're not getting involved. This is Coast Mountain Bus Company's issue, which is a subsidiary of TransLink, so don't be fooled, humans. But, it all comes down to the almighty dollar, and frankly, this will shock some people. I kind of side with the bus drivers on most of these issues. Security is a huge issue. Bathroom breaks, proper bathroom facilities is a huge issue. Those are pretty basic work conditions that need to be addressed by the powers that be at TransLink.
Well, you're right, and I mean, you mentioned the NDP don't plan to get involved. I mean, nobody ever plans to interfere
Yeah,
in labor negotiations. It's
certainly not NDP governments.
no, certainly not NDP
Yeah,
government, but I mean, no governments. I mean, it's not like the BC Liberals ever went into one of these things saying, "Can't wait to legislate these guys back to work." That's just not realistic. So that said, I have to think that the sort of more forward-looking rainy day planners in John Horgan's office are sort of starting quietly to think about what that might look like. It's the responsible thing to do to plan ahead in a sort of a worst-case scenario because a complete and utter gridlock in Metro Vancouver is they're the government. They don't like to think that they own things that happen under their watch sometimes, but they do. Yeah. And in ridings that they absolutely need, there's the North Shore of Vancouver is where this is worse already, and that they have a vulnerable seat there. And eventually. We might have to see them get involved, but we're not there yet. We're a few steps off from that yet.
Well, here's some trivia for folks. The last full-scale bus strike in the Lower Mainland was 2001. Mm-hmm. And, I don't remember it well, but the general consensus coming out of that was traffic actually moved better. Like, once you took buses off the roads, there was more space for cars and whatnot. SkyTrain still ran because it's automated. So the drivers were really hesitant. That union was very hesitant to ever walk out again because there was that narrative that happened. However, the people who suffered the most are people who would be considered, part of the core NDP support.
Yeah.
Ridings like Adrian Dix's, where people rely more heavily on transit than any other part of the province. And people who are maybe lower income, people who have given up their car, people who are maybe more environmentally bent. That is definitely part of that kind of coalition of urban voters that John Horgan has stitched together in this minority government. So the theory is, does it hurt them more? I thought Mike Smith had an interesting piece on the future of Beau and Ma. Beau and Ma, who not in cabinet, but is I think parliamentary secretary for TransLink on the North Shore. Yeah. Definitely tries to, play she's a professional engineer and she loves transit, loves TransLink, and everything's hot and great and wonderful about TransLink, but now, the rubber hits the road literally, and she's vanished. She's nowhere to be found. The NDP, are trying to deflect this as much as possible. So it is interesting to see that dynamic play out as well. That's a riding that the Liberals could win back, and Beau and Ma knows she's in a knife fight to stay MLA there. A full-scale strike, well, already, the C-Bus affects her riding more than any other. That's not great news for John Horgan. It's one of those, another one of those little things that happen. Everyone looks great the first month they're elected, but then they slowly, you get an arrow here, an arrow there, an arrow here, and before you know it, you get to the election and you're kind of bleeding out. It's interesting to see them starting to land on Horgan.
Yeah, and here's another angle that hasn't come up yet, but I think will. Jordan, we are in a climate emergency.
Great
and
point.
when you are forcing people, you've given them no choice but to take their own cars, their carbon dioxide spewing cars onto the roads, because in many cases it's either that or not going to work.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
How have you not legislated the bus drivers back to work?
Oh my God, the greenhouse gas emissions that are coming right now. Surely we're hitting that 2 degrees Celsius tipping point off of this alone. And you had the Prime Minister fly to Tofino.
Yes.
The emergency never ends. The emergency never ends.
I think that is because that is a line that the NDP have used and many of their supporters have used to dismiss concerns about the Massey Tunnel as one example. But if now all of a sudden you've got commuters who literally face the choice between not getting paid, or not getting their kids to school, or getting in their gas guzzling cars, is this emergency? Is this an emergency or isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's and that's the problem. When you call things emergencies and you don't act like it's an emergency, the public tune you out. And
exactly
and that's
right.
What we're seeing. Maclean, tell me about the Squamish First Nations and developers. You got to hand it to them. They're finding a way around the bureaucracy at municipal halls. Got to love it.
They are, and and as you never tire pointing out, I'm not in Vancouver, so I'm not as familiar with this stretch of land as I know you are. But it's just south of the Burrard Street Bridge, and the Squamish Nation is developing lands that they own there and turning them into I mean, if you have a chance to look online, the drawings that have been rendered of their project is actually, it's quite an impressive looking development. Dare I use the word beautiful. And in a city that desperately needs more housing units, this is exactly what a lot of people have been calling for. Why is it happening on Squamish Nation lands? Well, two reasons. Squamish Nation are making a smart investment, but also they can. They're not restricted by Vancouver City Hall's ridiculous bureaucracy, red tape. The Squamish Nation can stare down the NIMBYs that might surround their lands and just say, "Yeah, I don't care." And I wonder if this is the beginning of a trend.
Yeah. Well, I'm dying of curiosity. I won't comment on the designs. I haven't looked at it closely, but I'm dying of curiosity. Jody Vance, noted Kitsilano resident. What will she say? Because that is very close to Kits. That's it's encroaching in Vance land there. So I'll be curious what she has to say. What she has to say. I'm not even sure what the density is and anything like that, but we'll take a look. It is. Look. There's a housing crisis. There's a legit housing crisis. It's not a housing emergency, but there's definitely a housing crisis in the Lower Mainland. We need more housing for these people. I was talking to Bob Rennie once, and he was joking around that the big problem with Vancouver is that at Expo 86 and at the Olympics, we gave our business card to the world, and damn it, they came back and circled back to us, right? Like they kept it, And,
they did.
And it's been great for Bob Rennie. He's made a lot of money and been very successful in marketing to these people, to folks who have moved here. But you look at the way aging demographic. You look at the millennials coming in, and now Generation Z. You look at immigration. You look at migration from other parts of Canada. We're very, people want to live here, and we've got to find more housing for them. And to do that, we've got to increase supply. We can constrict demand in some ways, but supply still has to grow. And when you have municipal halls dragging their feet for years on basic permits, we cite the stat a lot at ICBA. Canada ranks 34th out of 35 OECD countries in how long it takes to get a building permit. And the truth is the number we use is actually for Toronto is worse than Vancouver.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It's a few days worse in Vancouver than what happens in Toronto. So, we're still ahead of the Slovak Republic, barely. But, this is not where we need to be. And you look at, forget the United States because, I know that a lot of our viewers will be like, we don't want to be like the States. But you look at the, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, we're 3 times longer to get a permit.
Yeah.
And that costs money, that slows down supply. We've got to do a better job of this. And kudos to the First Nations for, first of all, buying back their land. They get first right of refusal on land that government wants to sell. They never refuse because land is valuable, so they buy it back, and then they partner with these developers to get these projects going in a way that Jordan Bateman Development Inc. never could.
Yeah. Hey, it's a similar note to the previous point. It's either a crisis or it isn't. Yeah. And developments like this show that maybe some people are interested in doing something about it.
Well, look, BC Housing can't. We've seen the report. Selena Robinson, housing minister, taking a beating last week over the fact that I think 1,100 of the 120,000 units that they promised, 110,000 units have been started. More money has been spent on photo ops for most of these projects than have been spent on actual getting in the ground. It's not a great look for a government who prided themselves in opposition as having a better relationship with municipal governments. Christy Clark was mean to the mayors. We'll get things through by collaborating. Well, guess what? They're not, and that is a problem. Now, not coincidentally, a number of First Nations folks and development corporations landed in the Vancouver Magazine Power 50, which is what I want to talk about next. But let's talk about the political people. I don't know what it is about the Vancouver Magazine, but they sure don't like John Horgan very much. Last year, they put David Eby as number 1 ahead of the Premier of the province of British Columbia. This year, Eby fell, and rightfully so. He hasn't had a great year, and he's kind of falling down the ranks a little bit as far as influence. You think that would mean John Horgan would move up? No. Now it's Carol James ahead of John Horgan. Maclean, do you really think Carol James is more influential in Vancouver than John Horgan?
No, that's an odd choice, and it has nothing to do with Carol James. Carol James is the second most important person in the cabinet, and if the trends are going the way we think they are with the surplus and the economy, I think the role she's going to play is going to be even more important in the months and years to come. That said, she answers to the premier, and I mean she would be the first person to tell you that. It's kind of silly, I think, to if you're going to put political people in a power list, then like in barring some extraordinary situation, which we frankly do not have in this province, the premier should be first ahead of his or her own cabinet ministers.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the EB, you could make the argument, well, he was a Vancouver cabinet minister, this is Vancouver's list, okay. Carol James is in Victoria just like John Horgan. Like, I actually think it corrodes the. Look, there's no integrity to these lists anyways. It's an excuse to sell magazines in November, which is normally a slow magazine time. And take it from me, I was once a member of the Power 50. But, like, it's. I do think it hurts the Cowboys. Here's what bothers me. Candy Stewart, the mayor of Vancouver, is in the 15 range. And Doug McCallum, who frankly had more influence over the way the region was planned this year than any other mayor, maybe since Mike Harcourt in the 80s, maybe since Gordon Campbell in the 90s, you could argue, he's in the mid-20s. Like, that is nonsensical to me. This is a guy who single-handedly had the light rail plans scrapped for Surrey and changed to SkyTrain, who fought back with the TransLink funding model. Like, if there's one guy who's exerted more influence over Vancouver as a region than Doug McCallum as a politician, I can't find him. So it's that typical Vancouver bias. They get too cute. They get too cute by half, and Carol James is more powerful than John Horgan. Won't that be a slap in the face of the premier? It was. They would do this to Campbell from time to time. They'd put like Colin Hanson ahead of Campbell or Rich Coleman ahead of Campbell. Give me a break. Like, let's be clear. Carol James works for one guy, John Horgan. Yeah. And, it'd be ludicrous for me to say, yes, at ICBA, I'm more influential than Chris Gardner, the president. Of course I'm not. He's my boss, right? Like, give me a break.
Yeah. And here's the thing. Like, I don't think for a minute, and here's where you're going to roll your eyes at me. I don't think for a minute that Carol James looks at this list and sees that she's ranked above John Horgan, and there isn't a part of her that's like, oh, that's nice, good. I think she looks at that and goes,
Yep.
Like, this is, it gives the wrong impression. It's not helpful. And as I was saying before, it's just frankly not true. And I am sure that Carol James would be the first to agree with me on that.
Yeah, no. And I'll tell you who the second to agree with you would be. Probably Jazz Johal. No Andrew Wilkinson on the list. I don't have to be a soothsayer to know that Jazz Johal, who made the list, probably not terribly comfortable with the fact that he's on the list and the leader of the opposition is not. I find it a little odd that, again, it's a too cute by half thing by Vancouver Magazine. We'll put the critic from Richmond Queensborough on there instead of the leader of the opposition who actually represents a Vancouver riding. I mean, come on. It's a way to try to stir up some sort of dissent within the party, I think, or try to get people like you and I talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, as Jazz Johal is not going to be the next premier of BC. Right. Andrew Wilkinson may not be the next premier of BC, but he's got significantly better chances at the moment than Jazz. Yes. So whoever the next premier is will either be John Horgan's successor in the NDP or it will be Andrew Wilkinson. Right. And so it makes no sense.
And I love Jazz Johal. I've done events with him. He's a great guy. I get along with him fantastic. But I'm sure if I had Jazz here, he'd be like,
oh, I think he would 100% agree. And I would say that if you were going to put two BC Liberals on the list, that the Jazz would be a really good choice. But to suggest that he's more influential than his boss is, again, it's just, it's wrong.
It's wrong. All right, well, there you go. That's my annual complaints about the Power 50 list. Once again, Maclean, you and I finished tied for number 51. Congratulations.
Yeah, I assumed that's where
Congratulations on that. It's been very good. Okay, really quickly, hot politicians. Let me throw one out for, he's not hot, but he's warming up. Mr. Andrew Scheer survived the first big test, which was caucus got together. They could have triggered a vote on his leadership there. They decided not to vote on his leadership, which is a sign that they're going to stick with him. Next big test, of course, will be with the broader membership of the Conservative Party. That will be a lot more significant a test for him. But you got to hand it, Scheer survives the first step.
Let me ask you this: do you think that he would have been? I think, but you'll have more insight here on this. If he was going to be tripped up by either one of these two hurdles, the caucus or the convention, I would have thought the caucus would have been the more sort of dangerous, if you like. You may disagree, and I'm actually really interested to hear what you have to say here. I think that this probably means he's safe for the immediate future.
Yeah, I'm not sure. My sense is caucus wouldn't have supported him if they felt like he was not going to succeed in the leadership, in the broader membership vote. Although that being said, Maclean, in 2002, the BC Liberal Party has like every 2 years you vote on the leadership. I sat at a Fort Langley Aldergrove meeting. Bruce Coleman's riding. 2001, the BC Liberals had just won 77 of 79 seats. I sat next to a guy, well, he's passed away, so I'm sure he won't mind me using his name, Gary Taylor, winemaker extraordinaire, all-around great guy, diehard BC Liberal, free enterpriser in Langley. And he voted against Gordon Campbell's leadership after the guy had delivered 77 out of 79 seats. I was like, Gary, and we're kind of whispering because it's a secret ballot, but you're kind of doing it next to him. I'm like, Gary, what are you doing? He's like, we should have won 79. And he put in, so there's always that group that like doesn't like him anyways, doesn't like the leader anyways. The question is, have these guys in caucus gone and spoken with their kind of key supporters and said, no, I think he's going to survive this. I was a lot colder on the membership, his ability to survive a membership vote yesterday than I am today, because I think that generally these MPs would have talked to their key supporters and found that there's enough support to keep them.
Well, I'm not in a position to disagree. My sense is that would be to agree with you, but I happily concede that you have more insight here than I do.
Yeah, Gary Taylor. Gary Taylor was great. He once told me that Jordan, he was a winemaker. He's like, hey, Jordan, you want to know how you make you want to know how you get $1 million in the wine industry? Oh, yeah, Gary, how? Start with 2 million. The great Glenugie winery in the 2000s in Langley. All right, you want to talk about Twitter complainers? I feel like this could be a permanent topic.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong.
What are they complaining about this week?
This is not something that, and again, another thing that doesn't affect me here in the civilized part of Vancouver Island. But I guess Vancouver is banning fireworks, and this is largely down to I don't even think organized Twitter campaign. It's just sort of something that caught fire, haha. Oh. And the city council followed the bouncing ball and has now implemented a ban on fireworks. And I mean, I don't even really take a position on banning or not banning fireworks. I'm generally not pro banning, but I mean, that doesn't mean this was the wrong decision in this case. But I'm not sure that politicians following Twitter campaigns, even if they're not organized, is a good thing, because Twitter is not representative at all of the general population. And so this is a bit of a funny example because we're talking about something, fireworks, it's not crucial, but it's just, it makes me nervous. I don't think that Twitter is something that should be influential in politics, just because, again, it is so not representative of the general public, even in a city where it is more widely used like Vancouver. Yeah, no, it's a total echo chamber. Here's what I think. I think if politicians had just waited a week, the Twitter conversation changed to time change. Exactly. So, there's always something, and now, it should change from time change to, people are putting their Christmas decorations out too early. What about the vets? And we'll get to Remembrance Day, and then on Remembrance Day, it'll be people, after Remembrance Day, people are still wearing their poppies. It's disrespectful to wear your poppies after Remembrance Day. And then it'll get to, we're finally at Christmas. Black Friday is an American scam. We shouldn't have, there's always a rolling controversy on Twitter. Just take a break, take a beat. Do this maybe in March. Decide if it's really a priority. If people are still talking about March, then okay, have a discussion of it. Look, I live across the street from a park in Langley. There were a lot of fireworks going off. I'm lucky my dog seems completely oblivious to it. Kids slept fine. There was a lot of fireworks Halloween night. Nothing unsafe. I kind of enjoyed watching other people just, light shows for free. But it didn't bother me. And it's one night. Who cares? Who cares about one night? Just everyone needs to kind of relax. This is where the libertarian in me comes out a little bit. Do we have to ban everything? Come on. No fun city. Remember when we had that tag? It seems to be rearing its ugly head again. Well, there was an exemption in and I have to read this more carefully, but you can get an exemption for cultural events. But as somebody pointed out on Twitter to, I think one of the counselors is, not trying to be funny here, but what is Halloween if not a cultural event?
Yes.
In all seriousness, I'm not,
Yep.
so what's the difference? And the answer is, well, I mean, there isn't really one, and they were just following the bouncing ball on this one.
Yeah. And look, the weekend before was Diwali, and there was a lot of fireworks in Surrey.
Exactly.
And so you're going to say, okay, well, it's fine for cultural events like Diwali, but not fine for Halloween? Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense either. You're right.
No.
Cold politicians, just very quickly. Lana Popham still taking a beating online, mainly in the Facebook groups with farmers, over her comments and performance a couple weeks ago in the House now. More horror stories popping up every day from the ALC. I think Lana Popham's going to have to keep facing the music here over and over again until she's willing to finally put farmers ahead of farmland, which they seem kind of loath to do.
It's you're right. I can't argue with the word you just said. It's been interesting to watch Lana Popham specifically in her career because she's actually been remarkably consistent. I was going back through some of her tweets and stuff she's done when she was an NDP backbencher, and she was always much more explicitly concerned with farmland than farmers. There was a strange incident after the tsunami in Japan, where the first thing that she tweeted out was, it's just gutting me to see the loss of all this farmland. Which, I mean, yes, that happened, and that's sad, but also the people who died on the farmland. Yeah. I'm not suggesting Lana Popham didn't care about the farmers, but that is a lens that she has consistently applied to agricultural politics. Now that she is the minister, it's kind of, I guess the word is interesting to watch that kind of play out. Because she has focused on protecting farmland, even at the expense of some of the people who are trying to make a go of it working it.
Yeah, well, not Site C, though.
Not just saying. Different.
Just saying, sorry. Sometimes I like to take the knife out and stab the NDP in the front, so there you go. Not Site C. All right, finish this up. Oh, this is a good one. Go ahead, Maclean.
Oh, man.
Yeah, over and over again.
PR and the Kool-Aid chuggers, my God. It's it's my thoughts exactly too.
Shut up already.
It's one of those things that I know better not to engage with some of the true believers. And you know what? If you're one of them and you're watching this, let me just say to you this. I understand and I respect your passion, and you can be wrong. That's okay. And I'm not upset. But it drives me crazy. Election after election after election after election, where they're bemoaning the fact that the Green Party, which got 6.5% of the vote, doesn't have more power in government. I saw one thing that said, PR is the only reason that Elizabeth May is not the Minister of Environment right now, which is where she belongs. And there's all this talk about unearned seats, which is the most ridiculous argument you could possibly make. Yep. Each individual seat is an election, and the person who wins it has earned it. You don't have to like them. Where I live in Carol James riding. Carol James earned this seat. She did. Yeah. So did the what is her name? Laurel Collins, who is now my NDP member of Parliament here in Victoria. Laurel Collins earned this seat. It just drives me nuts. Let it go.
I have a theory. It's a conspiracy by Bill Thielman to keep himself politically relevant. He secretly goes out there, like Warren Kinsella, and seeds these little things out there so that he will constantly be relevant every decade forever. No, it is such a dead topic, and yet they drag it over and over again. And if only people saw it. Yeah, 3 times we voted on this in BC. The leftiest province in the Confederation, the one most likely to do this, and 3 times we said, no, thank you. Take a hint. The funny thing is these are the same people who love to talk about, consent politics and stuff like that, right? Yeah. And look, we haven't given our consent to this, so quit trying to jam it down our throats. We've said no once, twice, 3 times. We don't want it.
Exactly.
Get it out of here. Shut up already. I don't care about droop formulas. I don't care about your whining about it. I don't care about the fact, you really wanted to have the PPC with 1% of the seats in Parliament? Give your head a shake. Yeah, you're right. Now you got me all hot on the collar. I'm tired of talking about prop rep.
It's frustrating. And there is no more, the least persuasive argument these people make, and yet they keep making it over and over and over again, is that this system would be better for the parties they happen to support, usually the Greens or NDP. Yeah. Listen, my friends, you can support the Greens and NDP, and good for you. But if you are explicitly and specifically trying to rig the system or change the system so that your team does better, then that is not a good argument.
No, look, and frankly, David Eby did rig this last vote, hand-rigged the whole thing with the neutral arbiter who was actually completely in the tank for prop rep, and he still failed miserably. Yeah. So it's over. Get out of here. Even Justin Trudeau knows it's a dead issue. Forget about it. It's and how dare you ever consider changing the electoral system without the express consent and permission of the people being governed? That's just ludicrous, and I've never understood that, and I think it's the biggest flaw in these fools' argument. And I know there's a bunch of NGOs out there who need to stay relevant somehow and raise money from supporters, but come on, you lost, move on.
Yes.
PR.
And on that,
I feel like you and I will be like podcasting 10 years from now, and we'll still be talking about these idiots who want PR.
I was just about to say we could have copy and pasted this segment from about a year ago at this time.
Yeah. In fact, let's save this because we know it'll come up in 2021 after the provincial vote. So someone timestamp this. We will come back to this in 2021, I am sure. All right, well, that's it for the Hot Stove. We will be back next week on probably our regular day Wednesday. Maclean was Maclean. You stayed overnight Tuesday night, right? Obviously, you couldn't get a ferry back, so.
I stayed overnight.
And frankly, Wednesday post AGM, I completely crashed. It was like, every ounce of adrenaline was gone. I'm just laying on the couch answering emails, like, please, get me through this. So
this will be fun. It'll be when we have Hot Stove and Unspun running almost head to head. It's kind of fun. It's like the glory days of Raw and Nitro.
That's right. Which one are we? Are we Nitro? I guess so.
I think we're totally Nitro.
They were okay for a while. If they hadn't screwed up the Sting booking Sting at the end, they would have been all right.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And that time that Michael Buffer introduced Bret Hart as Bret Clark, that wasn't great.
That's unforgivable.
Still don't like Michael Buffer. Great. Bret Hart was the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be, and Maclean and I will fight anyone who says it otherwise. One last thing before I forget. Your Stampeders. I saw you took your son to his first game. Very exciting. We should talk about...
If you, it's true. I took him to the BC Lions Stampeders game last Saturday. You pointed out I'm a Stampeders fan. I have to say the Lions put on just like the best game day experience. We sprung a little extra to get the club seats because I only go once a year, and why not? You get to be in the tunnel when the players go out.
Yeah.
Like, it's unbelievable. You should have seen my son's face. You should have seen my face, quite frankly. The BC Place is gorgeous. It's by far the best facility in the CFL. It's better than some NFL stadiums I've been to. Actually, better than most NFL stadiums I've been to. And it's just, my son is 4.5. His favorite play is the punt because the ball goes so far, and it's a reasonable thing. But, we just had the best time. And I had the opportunity to tell George Chayka, who runs the business side of the Lions, like, you know what, you guys, obviously disappointing season on the field, but it's just first class in terms of the way your game presentation is. And if I lived in Vancouver or even near Vancouver, I wouldn't even be a thought. I would get season tickets.
Yeah, my 9-year-old as well took him to a game this year, loved it. You're right. They really enhanced their game per day performance this year. It's too bad the results on the field didn't follow, but is there got any Calgary assistant coaches that we can pluck away again? Or?
No, you keep taking them, and you can't have any more.
Is Dave's contract up? Can we get him? That would be great.
No,
we did it once. No, we stole him once. He led us to a Grey Cup. We need him back. All right. CFL football, obviously you're picking the Stamps to win the Cup?
Yeah, I'm going to. You pick the champs until they're beaten.
I'm going to say Hamilton. Here's what I think. I think attrition in the West. I think whoever comes out of the West is going to be pretty beat up. And I think Hamilton has the easier path, so we'll see.
That would be my other choice if I can't have Calgary off for some reason.
Yeah,
Hamilton looks really good.
But you hate Bob Price's Saskatchewan Roughriders. Admit it.
I do.
Price, I know you're out there. If you're watching this, none of us like the Riders. Price. We don't want to wear green. Leave us alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, leave her straight to bed, melon heads.
Yeah, on Twitter he was like trying to corrupt your son already.
It's not going to happen. My son carries around a little miniature Calgary Stampeders football and a little miniature BC Lions football. And he carries around like his children. He loves them. He takes them everywhere. Perfect. One's red and white, one's orange and black. And he thinks that he can like both teams. That's great.
Keep him away from those friggin' watermelons. That's all I can say. All right. Yeah. That's it for us. Thank you for putting up with our CFL talk. And we will see you next week.